On my phone screen, he looked like sunshine in a flannel, ocean blue eyes, a rescue dog, and a grin that promised easy Sunday mornings. We matched, we bantered, we planned coffee. Then at the last minute, he confessed, the photos weren't his. My heart dropped, but I didn't swipe away. I met him anyway, in daylight, in a crowded cafe, curiosity louder than fear. What happened next isn't a cautionary tale. It's the strangest love story I've ever lived. And I stayed. Before I tell you everything, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps me keep these heartfelt stories coming today. I'm sharing this with a warm mug beside me, and the window cracked just enough to let in a little evening breeze. I tell stories for a living. At least that's what my mother says I do, affectionately, whenever I call from my small apartment and let my voice linger in the old-fashioned way people used to on a landline. I'm not a professional storyteller. I'm just a man who has been alive long enough to know that sometimes the truth doesn't arrive all at once. It shows up in pieces, often when you've run out of patience. At the time this all began, I was 36 and, in the nicest way, tired. Tired of carrying groceries and silence up 4 flights of stairs. Tired of dinner turning lukewarm because I'd waited for a text that said, "Want to join me?" I had good friends and a good job, the kind they call stable, with paid time off and a desk plant that clung to life no matter how long my deadlines stretched. Still, something in me was honest enough to admit I wanted someone to share a grocery list with. Not a soulmate in the serendipity billboard sense, not fireworks, just the right kind of quiet with someone who wanted to be there. So I did what people do now. I downloaded Tinder after months of pretending I had lost the password to my own hope. I made a profile, took a slightly awkward selfie by my kitchen window, and typed a caption that hoped to say I was both serious and not a bore. I put that I loved slow movies, that I knew how to make a decent pot of chili, that I had a soft spot for rescue dogs even though my building wouldn't let me have one. I mentioned my favorite trail by the river and the fact that I text back quickly, not because I'm needy, but because I've learned that kindness often looks like effort. There's a rhythm to swiping you learn, and it feels a bit like shopping for a future you're not sure you can afford. Profiles blur until one stands out. For me, that was Aiden. He looked like the first half of a country song before the truck breaks down and the dog runs away. Plaid shirt, those blue eyes, stubble that looked like it didn't take itself too seriously. In one photo, he was holding a tiny gray pit mix against his chest, like a baby. The dog's tongue hung out in pure, unfiltered joy. In another, he was at a pumpkin patch, the kind of image that says, "I'm willing to go places just to hold warm cider with you." His bio was simple. Words have always felt like home. Let's trade stories over coffee or a long walk. A heart and a coffee cup emoji. If you're thinking that sounds like bait, you're right. And if you're thinking it sounds like the sort of bait that works on a man like me, someone who saves the good lines from books and tucks them under his tongue for later, you're right. Again, we matched in the usual way. A little digital fireworks animation popped up, and I felt the kind of stupid grin I don't apologize for. He messaged first. "I like your chilly confidence." I told him I liked his dog. He said the dog's name was Scout, which for a reader like me felt like a wink toward To Kill a Mockingbird and parents who gave thoughtful names to their pets. We sent a few photos. Me holding my niece at the park, him in front of a bookshelf, rows of hardcovers that could have been his or could have been a staged Airbnb, but I chose to believe. That week we texted each night. I learned he lived across town, worked in finance, and had a soft spot for people who say please and thank you to baristas. He was funny in a way that wasn't performative. He asked questions that didn't feel like checklists. He offered details I didn't ask for, the way people do when they're either a little nervous or a little honest. I drank him in like the first decent coffee after vacation with relatives who think decaf means you care more about your heart than your happiness. My friend Sasha, who will forever be the voice of both reason and warm car engine heat in my life, watched me smile over my phone while we ate pizza on a Friday night. "Is this going to be the one?" she asked, half singing. I shrugged. "He's nice," I said, which in my mouth is a serious word. She raised an eyebrow in that way that means be careful without saying don't be stupid. She's heard me promise myself caution before, but she's also seen me be brave, and she trusts that part of me more. The first sign, if you want to call it that, was small. When I asked to FaceTime after a week of talking that felt like both slow and steady, he said he hated video calls. He said they made him self-conscious. I thought about the million ways people earn the right to their comfort. I dated a man once who couldn't stand the sound of his own voice played back on a voicemail and would rather text than leave a message. I've been a fidgeter all my life. I understand the body as a complicated private house, so I didn't push. "Let's meet in person then," I said, light, breezy. He agreed, and we made a plan for Saturday morning at the farmer's market that pops up by the river, where, if nothing else, we could pretend we liked the same apples. Saturday morning came with that soft sunlight that makes everything look honest. I wore the sweater my sister calls my nice society cardigan, partly because it flatters me and partly because I wanted to bring my best to the table. I got there 10 minutes early, on purpose. I stood by a stand that sold honey and watched couples stand in that close comfort that you can't fake. Hands in pockets, gooseberries cradled in brown paper bags, kisses on temples. 10 minutes came and went. 15. Then my phone buzzed. "I'm so sorry," he wrote. "Work crisis. Can we reschedule?" I felt a small bubble of disappointment pop in my chest. I said, of course, because things happen and because I've learned that choosing patience builds muscle. He apologized again. He sent a longer message about hating to be the flaky one. He sent a photo of Scout with a caption about how the dog was a better man and wouldn't have stood me up. I laughed despite myself and let the disappointment take a back seat. We rescheduled for Tuesday night at a coffee shop that stays open late. Tuesday afternoon, my coworker Joe asked if I had plans after work. I said yes and tried not to make it sound like I might be walking towards something that mattered. The hours between 2 and 6 p.m. were a blur of emails and the kind of anticipatory stomach swoop that makes you feel 12 and 28 at once. At 5:30, on the sidewalk, the sky bruised purple and the air crisp enough to remind me I owned scarves, my phone pinged. "I feel sick," he wrote. "I'm so sorry. I swear I'm not like this." I stood for a moment, hand in pocket, and let the words settle without arguing with them. Maybe he was sick. Plenty of people got sick. Still, my mind had sharpened enough through other experiences to collect little flags and stack them in a corner of my consciousness. A no-show is one flag. Another late cancellation is another. Still, I told him to feel better and that we could try again. I made it a point to go into the coffee shop anyway, to have a night that belonged to me. I ordered a decaf latte with cinnamon on top. Yes, decaf, because it was late and I wanted to sleep. I sat by the window and watched the neighborhood go by. The way a man holds his wife's bag while she ties her shoe, the simple choreography of kindness. It was around then that Sasha called. "You didn't get stood up again, did you?" she asked, her voice half laughter, half worry. I told her he was sick. She told me to be careful. "People who are who they say they are usually don't keep ducking being seen," she said, slow and soft, so it felt like advice and not scolding. I promised I'd ask to reschedule one more time and then let it go. She told me she loved me. We hung up in that messy way where you both say bye and then neither of you do, so you add a second one for good measure. When I got home that night, Aiden had left me a longer message. He said he felt awful. He said he was mortified. He said he would do anything to make it up to me. He suggested Saturday brunch at a cafe I like because the pancakes taste like a childhood Saturday morning when the cartoons were good and no one was yelling. I said yes. He messaged me Friday night. "Can I tell you something? Please don't hate me." My body did a small protective thing, bracing without fully knowing why. I wrote back, "Go ahead." And that's when it came. In the simple directness of text bubbles that reveal and conceal in equal measure. The photos on my profile aren't me. There are moments when the world goes incredibly quiet. Not because the world is quiet, but because your mind is trying to rearrange itself around a new truth. The words "the photos aren't me" are a special kind of gravity. I closed my eyes. I let my head fall back against the couch cushion. This is where, in stories designed for caution, the narrator blocks the guy and delivers a speech about integrity. If that's the story you want, it's not this one, at least not yet. "What do you mean?" I typed, because even though the words were plain, I needed more. He said he was scared I wouldn't give him a chance if I saw him first. He said he'd use photos from a guy he followed on Instagram. He said he didn't expect to meet anyone meaningful. He said he's not model handsome and he's gained weight over the last year and he's lost some hair. He said he hates photos and he hates himself a little and he didn't plan for me. He said he was sorry, and it didn't look like a word tossed over a fence. It looked like something heavy in his palm held out to me, an admission with no ribbon. I was angry. I was insulted. The kind of insult that says, "Did you think I would only love you if you were someone else?" But I also recognized something I don't think you can ignore when you see it honestly. The hurt of a man who had been told by whatever and whoever had their fingers in him that he wasn't enough as he was. We talk about catfish like they're villains and only villains, and that's understandable because deception causes harm. But people pull crooked paths from their own pain, and sometimes those paths are shorter than the bridge you actually need to build to get across. It doesn't forgive, it doesn't erase, but it complicates the story, and I'm old enough to know most truths are complicated. Meet me, I wrote finally. Saturday. Still the cafe. 1 hour, in public. No more lies. And if any part of this scares me, I'll walk away. He agreed quickly, almost like he'd been waiting for a chance to stand in front of reality and say, "This is me." On Saturday, I got there early again because I am who I am. I sat at a small table near the window and ordered coffee. If you've never waited for someone you've technically already invested in without knowing what he looks like, I don't recommend it if you're in a hurry to keep your heart from pounding. I watched the door. People came in who could have been him if the photos had been real, and I felt a little relief that they weren't. They were handsome in that borrowed way that puts pressure on everything around it. I wanted honest, even if honest was messy. A little after the hour, a man stood in the doorway and scanned the room. He was shorter than the photos had suggested and heavier. His eyes weren't ocean blue. They were a deep, warm brown with the kind of tired that lives with kindness. He wore a baseball cap and a navy windbreaker and held himself like someone who was ready to turn around and leave if I flinched too hard in his direction. He took the cap off before he approached me, revealing a sweet, ordinary hairline that had taken a few steps back from a forehead that creased when he smiled, which he did, small and hopeful. "Mark?" he asked. "I'm Mark," I said. "Aiden?" He shook his head. "Ben," he said, his voice lower than I expected, gentler too. "My name is Ben." He looked me in the eye when he sat down, and that mattered. "Thank you for meeting me," he said. "You didn't have to, and you probably shouldn't have, and I'm sorry." A server came by and asked if he wanted anything, and he ordered a tea because he said he'd been drinking too much coffee lately, a nervous habit. His hands shook a little, not like tremors, but like a kid caught cheating who wants to hand back the answers and start over. He pulled in a breath. "I don't really know how to do this, but I want to try." He told me the truth in pieces, because that's how it happens when you don't have practice at being fully seen. He'd been in a relationship for a long time with a man who had a cruel relationship with honesty. He'd been told often and with conviction that he was lucky anyone wanted him. He'd neglected himself, gained weight, lost hair, lost the easy relationship with his own reflection. When he finally left, he wanted to feel chosen, and the internet was a buffet of small yeses. To post a photo that wasn't his felt like putting on a costume when the house is on fire and you need to get to the street to ask for help. He hadn't planned to meet anyone, not really. Then we matched, and the words went on and felt like food. He felt seen, and, if he's honest, he liked being treated like a man with a dog and blue eyes and a body he didn't have to rethink in the mirror every morning. I let him talk. Then I said the things you say when you're allowing anger and empathy to share a table. "This hurt me," I told him. "And it could have been dangerous." He nodded. "I know," he said. "There isn't a reason good enough, but I have reasons and I'm not hiding them." He said he wanted to make it right and knew that might not be possible. He said if all I needed was to look at him and say no, he would accept it. He said if there was a way to start over, he would do the work for as long as it took. What I felt then wasn't adrenaline or the high of being begged. It was quieter than that. It felt like standing in front of a childhood home you haven't seen in decades and realizing it's smaller than you remember, but the porch light is still the same warm. I told him I had one question he had to answer fully. What else aren't you telling me? He closed his eyes for a second and opened them. I live with my mom right now, he said. She got sick last year and I moved in to help. I'm not great at job title bragging. I left finance. I'm working at a community center. I make less money and sleep better. I'm not on drugs and I'm not married and I don't have kids I'm hiding. I don't drink more than a beer now and then. I didn't stop using the fake photos earlier because I wanted to be someone else. I stopped because I wanted to be me with you. That's the truth. There's an exhaustion that belongs to men who have carried the wrong version of themselves into rooms and had to keep holding it up like a heavy painting. I saw it on him, the relief already starting at the edges. I told him I wanted to do something I'd never done before, start a relationship in reverse. We start from the place where we've already been angry and scared, I said. We start from your apology. We start from my no guarantees. We start with a walk instead of a kiss. If you want to try, we'll try slowly. We walked, coats zipped, on the trail by the river. He told me about his mom, how she hums without realizing it while she chops vegetables, like a person keeping time with life so she doesn't lose it. He told me about Scout, and this is where the second true confession came. Scout wasn't his dog. He'd been dog-sitting for a friend when he took the photo. I laughed, genuinely, because at that point, the piling on of lies turned a corner into something human rather than manipulative. Do you like dogs at least? I asked. He smiled, the crinkles by his eyes the real kind. I love dogs, he said, but my building didn't allow them when I took that photo. So I took a picture with someone else's joy and pretended it would be mine if the angle was right. We walked past a man teaching his daughter to ride a bike, both of them whooping with the kind of victory that makes you say, I want that feeling on my worst days. We walked past a couple arguing quietly but holding hands. Life was happening outside us. Inside our small world, I said yes to a second meeting. He said he would delete his Tinder profile entirely and make a promise he could keep. If he ever felt himself going small enough to hide, he would tell me now instead. I told him he would need to earn back something he hadn't had time to build yet, trust. He nodded, and the nod wasn't eager or performative. It was the kind of nod you give when you're signing up for something that's going to take work. We didn't touch that first day, except for a handshake that felt firm and shy at once. That night, he sent me a photo of his dinner. Too many vegetables sautéed with a heavy hand, which I told him with a smile. I'm out of practice, he wrote. I sent him a picture of the soup I'd made, my grandmother's recipe. He asked for it, and I said that was the kind of thing I give to people who show up. I will, he wrote. Over the next weeks, he did. He showed up in exactly the modest, quiet ways I hadn't realized I needed. He sent voice memos when texting felt too thin. He sent photos of things that didn't try to be perfect. His breakfast cereal, the post office line he was stuck in, the sock he accidentally dyed pink because he didn't sort his laundry. He called me when he said he would. He said the words, I was wrong, and you're right, and I don't know, like they weren't swallowing glass. He asked how my day was and listened past the first sentence. He told me about having a panic attack in a grocery store once because he saw his ex in the frozen foods aisle and spilled a bag of peas and felt 14 again, clumsy and watched. He told me he went home and let himself cry for 15 minutes and then texted his sister, who told him she loved him and reminded him she still had the scar from where he taught her to ride a skateboard badly and she fell and they both laughed until they cried again. He was a man made of apologies and determination, and I liked him. We had our first real date, the kind with all the typical things, in a used bookstore that smelled like paperbacks and old air conditioning. He held books with both hands the way people hold rare birds. He asked me about the writers who raised me. I told him about Baldwin and Didion, about how kindness on the page can sometimes mean honesty that hurts. He told me about the books he pretended to read in college and the ones he actually did. He pulled a cookbook off the shelf and said, let's make something together. We picked a recipe not for its difficulty, but for the way it reminded me of my grandmother's kitchen, where garlic was a love language and stirring was a way to be affectionate without being too much. The first time we cooked together, we almost burned the onions because we were talking. He cut his finger, small, and hid it because he thought I'd think he was useless. I saw the way his shoulders tightened when he thought he'd failed. I wrapped a Band-Aid around his finger and kissed the top of his hand, light, just a heartbeat of skin against skin. He looked at me with eyes that were not blue, but were exactly what I needed. "Thank you," he said, like no one had ever been gentle on purpose with him. We didn't rush the physical. Not because we're saints, but because there's a difference between going fast to erase a mistake and going slowly to build something that can hold the weight of your real life. Our first kiss came after a movie, the kind with credits you stay for because the music feels like lingering. He walked me to my door and didn't ask to come in. He just stood there, quiet, looking at me like I was someone whose calendar mattered. I said, "Can I kiss you?" Because consent should be a small miracle we practice until it isn't a miracle anymore. He nodded and our mouths met, soft and careful, like the first page of a book you've waited your whole life to start. I could smell his laundry soap. I could feel the softness of his lip and the tiniest tremble that said, "I can't believe this is happening, and also I've never wanted something to happen more." That night, I fell asleep without needing to replay everything in my head like I was refereeing a game no one asked me to officiate. I woke up and he'd texted good morning to me and the sun as if we were both in need of greeting. He sent a photo of the sky above his mom's driveway, pink like someone spilled lemonade on it and no one cleaned it up. I told my friends, slowly, about Ben. They were skeptical, just as a good tribe should be when protecting one of their own. "He lied," Sasha reminded me, not unkindly. "He did," I said. "And now he's telling the truth." She sighed and managed a smile. "Then we will make him feel the weight of our eyeballs," she said, which is our code for the kind of gentle scrutiny you give someone you hope will make your friend happy. He met them at a potluck. He brought a simple salad and apologized for its simplicity. He washed dishes at the end without being asked. He talked to my friend Mike's toddler about dinosaurs with a seriousness that made the child believe. He didn't hold my hand the whole time. He didn't cling to me like a buoy. He was fine on his own and better near me. On the way home, I felt good. Not everything was smooth. It never is. There was a night when I saw his phone light up and the name of the guy whose photos he'd used appeared in a notification. My stomach did a whole acrobat routine I haven't seen since High School Musicals. "Why is he messaging you?" I asked, keeping my voice about as calm as someone in the front row at a fireworks show. Ben looked at me, and I watched the fight or flight start behind his eyes and then move away. "Because I DM'd him a few months ago to ask if I could use one photo," he said, which he had not told me, because he hadn't told me a lot yet back then. He didn't answer then. I think he saw the message recently. He just wrote, "Dude?" We laughed, but my laugh had edges. "Show me the message," I said. He did. It was exactly what he said, awkward and human and a little cringeworthy. He wrote back to the guy, "I'm sorry. I did something dumb when I didn't like myself. I won't do it again." The guy wrote, "K," and that was that. It wasn't some dramatic twist. It was just another moment where the past touched the present and we let it, without letting it stay. Another time, I discovered he hadn't deleted Tinder yet, even though he'd said he would. The app was still on his phone, tucked in a folder. I felt the kind of betrayal that is swift because it's familiar. He explained that he kept it because he wanted to remember who he used to be and why he didn't want to be him anymore. He said he'd kept it like people keep cigarettes in a drawer to prove they're stronger. "That's not how it works," I said, calm as I could manage. "Prove your strength by not needing the drawer." He deleted it there with me. He apologized. "Not a grovel, just a quiet I let you down," he promised again. I wondered if I was a fool and then remembered, we're all fools when we hope. That's not an insult. It's a brave acceptance of risk. He took me to meet his mom on a Sunday. She was small and had the softest hands, the kind that bake love into everything they touch. She called me dear and meant it. She told stories while we sliced carrots, stories about Ben as a kid, a boy who brought home stray kittens and asked questions too big for his age. She looked at him with the kind of pride that doesn't need a parade. I watched them move in a kitchen that had seen enough life to be warm even when no one was in it. The refrigerator was covered in magnets with quotes, the kind you get from tourist shops and book fairs. One said, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." I wanted to hug that magnet. I wanted to tell it thank you for showing up this way. We went to a little fall festival with her, the kind with kettle corn and crafts and children who run past with sugar stuck to their mouths. Ben held my hand deliberately, not in a showy way, just long enough for my body to set a baseline. This is where his hand feels like. He let go to point at things and then came back. We fed each other bites of too sweet fudge and laughed when it stuck to our teeth. There's something about seeing the people who made the person you're falling for that makes everything inside you quiet down. It wasn't a proposal. It was better. It was evidence. He hadn't come from nowhere. He had a map written in someone else's handwriting. As the months rolled, we carved out small routines. Wednesday nights were for dinner at his mom's, where she'd survey us like a proud general behind a soup ladle. Saturday mornings were for the flea market, where we looked for old picture frames and records we didn't own a player for. We learned each other's habits, the way I like to fold a towel in thirds because that's how my grandmother did it, and the way he likes to make coffee as a ritual, measuring, a tiny scientist at a lab bench. He talked in his sleep sometimes. Little hums that made our dog, the one we finally adopted, a rescue named Murray with mismatched ears, lift his head and then put it back down with a sigh like an old man. Yes, we got a dog. We waited until it made sense and then didn't wait too long to welcome joy when it knocked. Murray was shy and stubborn and perfect. He made our mornings feel like they belonged to more than our alarm clocks. We had our first big argument over something that wasn't small, and I want to tell you about it because love isn't credible without tension. He was offered a full-time position at the community center, bigger hours and small raise, but it meant less time to help his mom. He wanted to say yes because it was his life. She wanted him to think. I wanted him to be okay. We sat in my living room, the dog asleep and not offering counsel, and talked in circles. He felt guilty for wanting more. I felt sad watching him shrink. We snapped at each other in that careful way would-be adults do. No name-calling, just sharp tone. You can't make yourself smaller to fit inside the idea of a good son someone else wrote, I said, which was a version of something my therapist once told me. And you can't make me move faster than I am moving because you're strong enough to do it, he said. We sat like that, stubborn and tired. Then he reached across the couch and took my hand. He didn't apologize, not because he wasn't sorry, but because sorry wasn't the point. I'm scared, he said. There it was. The thing under the thing. We took a walk. We talked slower. We called his mom together and asked what she really needed and what she could get help with elsewhere. We made a plan that included hiring a neighbor to help with errands twice a week, paying her from the small raise so it felt like the same money had been multiplied into kindness. He took the job. It wasn't a hero moment, just the kind of decision people make when they mean it. I told him once that I still didn't fully understand why he used the fake photos, even though I did understand in the ways that matter. He said something I have carried since. Sometimes you want to be loved so badly you forget that being loved isn't the same as being seen. He asked me if I was scared he'd lie again. I told him that I was a human man and not a statue made of perfect trust. But, I said, and I meant it, I'm learning you day by day. And every day you tell the truth, you give me a piece of my trust back. He nodded, and I watched his jaw unclench. He once told me he knows when he is lying by the way his tongue feels heavy in his mouth. Now he felt light most days. He laughed more. He made bad jokes better. There were little anniversaries. The day we deleted the last photo on his phone that wasn't him and replaced it with one where he looked exactly like himself. Hairline and soft belly and smile that looked more at home than any model grin. He posted that photo online with a caption that said, "This is me. Thank you to the person who makes me want to show up." He tagged me, and I held my breath in the way that people do when they step out in public in a new dress. Responses came in waves, supportive and kind, and exactly the way the internet can be when it wants to be a friend. There were a few rude comments because there are always a few, but they didn't stick. We went on a trip to the botanical garden in the city over because we were in a place in our relationship where walking and looking at pretty plants felt like a celebration. It was raining lightly, so the glass domes looked like they were exhaling. We stood in front of a wall of orchids, the kind of beauty that feels a little unfair, and he took my hand. "You know," he said, "if I'm honest, The fake photos were less about deceiving someone else and more about tricking myself into believing I was worth the risk. I squeezed his fingers. "We are all risking," I said, "but I'd rather risk with the person who is willing to take off the costume. We almost broke up once. I want to tell you that too, because if I paint it as simple, I'll be doing you a disservice." He forgot to tell me that he ran into his ex and had coffee, intending closure. It wasn't malicious. It was a muscle memory leaning back toward old pain, the way a person touches a bruise to see if it still hurts. He told me a week later, guilt sitting on his shoulder like a bird that had decided to nest there. I felt betrayed not by the coffee but by the time he let pass between the truth and me. "You are allowed your past," I said, "but not at the cost of our present." We sat on our stoop and let the night press against our shoulders. "I think I still believe that keeping something quiet will keep it small," he said. "It never does," I answered. He cried, the quiet kind. I put my hand on his knee. I didn't give him gold stars for confessing. I gave him a boundary. He kept it. It has held. Now, if you're waiting for a proposal under a string of lights while a friend with a guitar plays our song, you might be disappointed and then, if you're anything like me, relieved. We did that in our own time, and it didn't look like a movie. We were in our kitchen on a Thursday in sweatpants. There were dishes in the sink. A commercial on TV had made us both tear up because it featured a grandfather teaching his granddaughter how to dance in the detergent aisle. I was drying a plate. He was leaning against the counter. The dog ain't impressed. He said, "I want to keep choosing you." I said, "I want to keep choosing you too." He asked, "Are you in this for the long road?" I said yes. No fireworks, just the steady hum of the refrigerator and the feeling of a room that knows your name. That night, we slept like people who had made a decision that didn't need to be performed. I won't say I recommend dating a catfish. I won't make a cute joke about catching one and keeping it. I don't want to flatten what could have gone very wrong for me into something charming. Deception is dangerous. It can be cruel. It can end in hurt that lasts in the body longer than the initial blow. I will never tell you to ignore your instincts. In fact, I'll tell you the opposite. Trust them. The only reason I met him at all was because I knew how to do it safely. Public place, friends who knew where I was, my own car, daylight. I didn't go alone into anyone's home. I didn't let the hope in me outvote the caution in me. But I also didn't let fear cancel curiosity when the person on the other end was willing to be accountable. Accountability is the difference between a mistake and a pattern. He chose accountability. Love is, I think at this age, a choice, not a magic trick. There is chemistry and there is fate, if you believe in it. And there are also daily decisions that make you someone worth waking up next to. He became someone like that for me, not because he pretended to be a better man, but because he learned how to be himself without apology and without the need to shrink from daylight. He is funny and patient and not interested in winning little fights, which makes it easier not to have them. He is stubborn in the right ways, the ways that keep you from abandoning yourself when the world asks you to be smaller. He takes the trash out without me asking because he noticed that sometimes I forget. And that's love too in its domestic costume. Sometimes people ask how I knew he was my match. I could tell you something grand, like the way standing next to him feels like standing at the ocean without all the noise. Or the way his laugh wears my name, or that after enough years of grocery trips alone, the feeling of sharing a list is as romantic as light through a window. But the truth is simpler. I knew because he kept showing up. He showed up in the uncomfortable moments and the ordinary ones, not just the shiny new days that want to be posted. He took the word sorry and turned it into a map. He carried his share. He told the truth even when it made him sweat. He let go of the version of himself he made up and didn't try to make his way back to it. We did one official thing, just to mark it. We made a profile together on a different app with both our faces because at that point we weren't looking. But we wanted to tell the story of what happened, to say, we met on an app and almost didn't. We got it wrong and then tried to get it right. We wrote a short bio, short because the truth doesn't need a lot of dressing. It said he was my Tinder catfish. Now he's my partner. Honesty saved us. Swipe right on telling the truth. We posted it and then forgot about it until a message came from a stranger who said they had catfished once and stopped and were now scared to try again. Don't be a better liar, I wrote back.
Be a better you. Meet someone in the daylight.
Start there. On the anniversary of our first coffee, we went back to the same cafe. The barista was new, didn't know us. We sat by the window again. The light looked the same. He took off his cap, although he no longer wore one often, and put it on the table like a talisman he didn't need. I looked at him, his face, not a model's, that I had learned the planes and shadows of in the way you learn a favorite route home. We ordered pancakes because why mess with something good? He lifted his fork like he was making a toast and said, "To all the ways we didn't know how to do this until we did." I laughed and tapped my fork to his. We ate, we walked by the river. We didn't look for signs. We didn't need them. Sometimes, late at night, when the dog snores and the world feels smaller, we talk about fear. He tells me he's still learning not to check for exits in every good moment. I tell him I'm still learning how to believe the good moments can be ordinary and still be ours. He tells me he appreciates how I tell the truth without using it like a knife. I tell him I'm grateful for the way he could have lied again and chose not to. We practice being kind to the versions of ourselves that made mistakes. We say thank you to the ones that tried too. If you're out there and you've been hurt by someone who wasn't who they said they were, I won't talk you into forgiving, and I won't tell you to forget. You get to protect yourself. You get to build fences and gates that open only for people who knock in the daytime. You get to choose who deserves your story. If you're out there and you've been the one hiding, I hope you know your face is not a problem to be solved. You are not a before picture. You are a human being with a voice that still works, even when you think it won't. Tell the truth, not because it will guarantee you a love story, but because it will guarantee that when love does show up, it will be looking for you and not for the costume. This is the part of the story where I tell you how it ends. It doesn't. That's the best thing. We are still here. He is in the other room right now, humming off key, trying to fix a cabinet door that leans because our building is older than our patience. He will call my name in a minute and ask me to hold it steady while he tightens a screw. I will, then we'll take the dog for a walk. We'll pass the woman on the corner who grows tomatoes and shares them if you compliment their color. We'll stop at the bodega and get milk and maybe a candy bar we pretend we won't share and then break into perfect halves without discussing it. We'll come home. We'll watch the news with the sound low because the world can be loud. And I'll put my feet in his lap and he'll put his hand on my ankle and we'll be two people who found a way through something and into something better. He was my Tinder Catfish, and he is my perfect match. Not because he was perfect to begin with and not because I am, but because, when faced with the choice between the easy lie and the hard truth, he learned to pick the second one, and I decided to believe him and myself enough to walk beside him. It's not a recipe I'd recommend in general, but it's ours. It tastes like pancakes and coffee and the way someone's name feels in your mouth when you're not trying to change it. I'll leave you with this. The best matches don't always strike on the first try. Sometimes you fumble the box. Sometimes your hands shake. Sometimes it's damp and you have to cup the flame with your palm and whisper a little until it catches. And then, if you're lucky and stubborn and paying attention, the light takes. It's steady. It's enough. You warm your hands. You say thank you to the people who trusted you with their worry. You turn around and see that the room you're in has always been big enough for both of you. You close the app. You keep the love. You step into the day.